let's turn to the metaphor that you use a lot of times. It is a metaphor also strongly connected to Pope Francis, namely the image of a church as a field hospital. What patients are what are the biggest diseases that we have to cure in this place?
Well, the Holy Father first made reference to this during the discussions before the conclave of 2013. And he noted that many times artistic representations of Jesus are him knocking at a door to come into the church. But he said sometimes Jesus is on the other side of the door. He's in the church knocking to get out, so that the church can go into the world. And it is there then that he wants to situate the church as not being self-referential, as he calls it, but really ministerial. And so the image of the field hospital for the church means that we don't sit back and wait for people to come to us, but we go to them where they are wounded. And when we do that, we don't ask questions about worthiness, about what they have done, how they got wounded, but we treat the wounds. We make sure that we bring the healing of Christ. But the other thing is, in a field hospital, so many times we know from experience that people, especially in the military, who have field hospitals where there are wounded, learn new ways to bring about healing and curing. There is an invention of new procedures sometimes. And so the church has to be nimble enough. It has to be imaginative enough to look for ways to treat new illnesses, new diseases, new wounds. And sometimes that means giving ourselves the freedom to look for new treatments for people. The Holy Father, for instance, has done this in the way in which he has provided new opportunities to deal with marriages that are broken. Mm-hmm. He has given bishops permission to move forward with new rules in canon law that allow marriages to be nulled, or declared null, and which people then can move on with the next stage of their life. And so it is about how do you apply the healing power of mercy in the lives of people so that they can have hope that they do have a new future. And so that is what a field hospital does. It looks for new ways in which wounds that people suffer can be healed.
Mm-hmm. And concerning those wounds, we always speak that this is the time of objectifying people, like using them, that we have so many excluded, homeless, but also in cultural way, for example, Muslims. In Poland, we have a popular Kardynał Krajewski, who is working in the Vatican as a papal almoner, and his actions are very popular among Catholics in Poland, despite he helps migrants and Muslims, which are not very welcomed in Poland. Still, his actions are really respected. And I would like to ask you personal questions. What do you think as a cardinal, as a bishop, you can do as a Catholic for the marginalized and for the wounded people, or what you do?
Well, I think it's always important to realize that we have to make sure that no one is excluded, because humanity is impoverished whenever we begin to build walls rather than bridges. And so humanity, not only the individual who is marginalized suffers, but all of humanity suffers because we forget who we are, that we are together, that we are one, that we are united with those. And of course, the sufferings of Jesus, where our faith begins, is a reminder that Jesus is closest to those who suffer, to those who are forgotten, those who are neglected. His whole ministry was about that. So if we really want to get to know Jesus, we should be at the margins. We should make sure that no one's neglected, because that's where Jesus is. We cannot claim that Jesus is present just in the sacraments or in the tabernacle. We believe that, that's true. But he's there as the one who is the bread of life for those who are starving for justice, who are neglected. And that is something that we need always to keep in mind. If we're really true to Jesus, we have to go where Jesus is. Jesus is with those who suffer, because he is the suffering servant.
We've touched the society context in a way by this question, and U.S. society struggles with immigration and solidarity crisis. What can you do as a bishop to resolve such a problems, and what do you think lay Catholics can do to resolve such a problems? What stance should they take?
Well, of course, we see that the plight of refugees is a worldwide problem. The estimates are that there are 60 to 70 million refugees throughout the world who have left their home, mostly because of war, violence, poverty, hunger. And so this is a global issue. We do experience it in a particular way in the United States, where we have many people who want to come into our country. And there are also, in a special way, those who are fleeing the violence in Central and South America that is created by the drug traffic. And we in the United States have to take responsibility for this, because in many ways the casual drug use in our country, which supplies a lot of money to these drug lords, who then create violence in these various parts of Central and South America, are able to do that because of the money that we supply. So it's a complex problem. When people say that these refugees should stay in their home, that they should not try to flee the violence, the threats against their children, the ways in which their life is put in jeopardy, we in America need to have an examination of conscience. What is our role in creating those situations, especially with the amount of money that goes because of drug use in our country? Now, there are people who are addicted to drugs, and we need to help them. But there are also people who use drugs in a way to just in a casual way. And there's almost a mentality at times we see in the entertainment world as though it's a joke to use drugs. It's something to have to allow entertainment to be sold. And I think that we need to have an examination of conscience. What is our responsibility here? These people who flee, mothers carrying children, fathers like the one that was drowned in the river that we saw recently, are just trying, like any parent would want to try, to look for a way in which they can bring safety to their children, give their children a future. We should all be united in that aspiration, that we would support that kind of person. And otherwise, if we don't, then there's something wrong with our soul.
We've been talking about crisis in church, about clericalism, about crisis in word. So maybe the last question will be devoted to hope. What are the signs of God's presence nowadays? How to look for Him despite the crisis?
Well, I think that that's a very important and good question, because I think that's what motivates Pope Francis. I was having dinner with a very significant person who is a leader in the entertainment world in Hollywood. And he asked me during the dinner, what's different about Pope Francis? What makes him tick? And I responded, you have to understand that Pope Francis really believes not only that Jesus rose from the dead 2,000 years ago, but that He's alive now. and working in the world. And his job as the Pope is to look for where Jesus is leading the church and where he's going. So that is the central question today that we have in the life of the church. It's not the program of the church that we designed because we want to maintain our institutions, that we want to in some way keep the structures. Structures are important, institutions are important. But we always have to be guided by the Spirit of Jesus and where we're being led. And so I see that the Holy Father already has pointed to some ways. For instance, family life. The Synod on the Family pointed out there are many people who are struggling to raise families, to be faithful to their marriages, and that the church is there to help them do that. And so when I look at parents make great sacrifices for their children, when I see fathers taking on roles that were not always part of a father's role in the past, and when I grew up, when I see my nephews and nieces work in a way in their marriages so that they really have an equality in their marriage and that they support and love each other, I see that as the power of the Spirit in the world today. When I see young people who are going off on mission trips, not going on their spring breaks to entertain themselves, but sacrificing so that they can go and help others, I see the work of the Spirit. When I see as well seminarians who many times rejected by their families come to say they want to serve the life of the church, or religious women, young women, who will bravely take up a countercultural response to giving their life, I see the work of the Spirit. So there are many signs every day that I see, but I think my advice to people is, let's look for those signs in the world and hold them up. There is a lot of evil, a lot of sinfulness, a lot of bad judgments that are made. There are things that we can criticize so very easily. But there are also opportunities for us to look for where the Spirit of Christ is working in the world and to celebrate those. That's the way I try to live my life. If I center only on the things that are wrong, then I will become discouraged. Mm-hmm. We have to pray for consolation, the consolation of seeing where the Spirit is working today.